Hello, everyone. My name's Robert Hamberger, and we're here to celebrate the online launch of Naomi Foyle's fourth collection, Salt and Snow, which was published by Waterloo Press early in 2025. What we're going to do this evening is Naomi will read with Seni Seneviratne and Catherine Okoronkwo. And so we've got a great evening of three wonderful poets. We will start by Seni reading, and then Naomi will read personal elegies from the book. There'll then be a brief break, and then Catherine will read, followed by Naomi reading collective elegies from the book. So just to explain, there should also be time for a Q&A at the end. Salt and Snow is a triptych of personal and collective elegies. The book contains tributes to departed family members, friends, and writers, and mourns victims of political violence, from George Floyd to civilians caught up or killed in the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the Hamas war crimes of October the 7th, and Israel's genocide in Gaza. Concluding with a mytho-poetic sonnet crown circling themes of eco-apocalypse and regeneration, Salt and Snow is a finely interwoven meditation on grief, witness, whiteness, and climate crisis. Now, before Naomi reads, Seni Seneviratne will read. Seni is a writer of English and Sri Lankan heritage. She is published by People Tree Press. Wild Cinnamon and Winter Skin appeared in 2007, The Heart of It in 2012, Unknown Soldier in 2019, and The Go Away Bird in 2023. Unknown Soldier is a Poetry Book Society recommendation and National Poetry Day choice, and was highly commended in the Forward Poetry Prize 2020. From September 2023 to July 2024, Seni was touring an Arts Council funded project based on the book. Her poem, A Wider View, is included on the Aqua GCSE poetry syllabus. She is one of 10 commissioned writers on the Colonial Countryside Project and a fellow of the Complete Works Programme for Diversity and Quality in English Poetry. She co-edited Out of Sri Lanka, an anthology of Tamil, Sinhala, and English poetry for Blood Axe in 2023, with Vijan Ravintharan and Sash Trevitt. The book received a PBS special commendation. And I should say that Seni will begin her reading tonight with a poem from the Palestinian poet Mohammed El-Kurd. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here at the launch of Salt and Snow, this wonderful book of Naomi's. And if you haven't got it already, I hope you are moved to get it by the end of tonight. Ever since my last book came out in October 2023, every reading that I've done, I have begun my reading with a poem by a Palestinian poet. So this is my offering tonight. Mohammed El-Kurd's book, Rifaq, has a lot of poems in about his grandmother. This is called This Is Why We Dance. Home in my memory is a green, worn-out couch, and my grandmother in every poem. Every jasmine picked off the backlash, every backlash picked off the tear gas, and tear gas healed with yogurt and onions, with resilience, with women chanting, drumming on pots and pans with godams and hasbiyallas. They work tanks, we know stones. 2008, during the Gaza bombings, my ritual of watching TV ran between grieving and Egyptian belly dance music. I fluctuated between hatred and adoration, stacking and hoarding Darwish's reasons to live, sometimes believing them, sometimes dipping my bread in indulgence, knowing a child is breadless in Khan Yunis, dipped in a roof's rubble. If you ask me where I'm from, it's not a one-word answer. Be prepared, seated, sober, geared up. If hearing about a world other than yours makes you uncomfortable, drink the sea, cut off your ears, blow another bubble to bubble your bubble and the pretense, blow up another town of bodies in the name of fear. This is why we dance. My father told me, anger is a luxury we cannot afford. Be composed, calm, still. Laugh when they ask you, smile when they talk, answer them, educate them. This is why we dance. If I speak, I'm dangerous. You open your mouth, raise your eyebrows, you point your fingers. This is why we dance. We have wounded feet, but the rhythm remains, no matter the adjectives on my shoulders. This is why we dance, because screaming isn't free. Please tell me, why is anger, even anger, a luxury to me? The next poem is one of mine that I wrote sometime last year for Gaza. I walk in the rain to black rocks in search of a poem. Though my head is full of slogans, though I ask myself, what use is a poem when no rhythm can soothe the countless children carrying the label WCNSR, wounded child, no surviving relatives. When no line length can contain the grief, no rhyming couplet can provide a reason why this is acceptable to anyone. Bare branches hanging from granite clefts remind me of scorched olive trees, and beneath them there's a shape in the rock like a child swaddled in a shroud. There's no peace here. There's no peace. No peace. No matter how many of us are calling out for it. Yeah, I decided to read this poem tonight because I think we all need some hope at the moment. And although I wrote this some time ago about a different circumstance, it does still feel like it's relevant for today. The habit of hope. Though it's sometimes nurtured by the naming of birds, mine's not a thing with feathers, but more like measured footfall on a slow walk to the hide. The moon a crescent in morning sky, putting one foot in front of another towards the promise of a stillness, which is more like hovering the way a hummingbird hovers, 50 wing beats per second, savouring moments of colour, collecting nectar in small sips, playing a part in the bigger picture of survival. It is, after all, what I leaned on, this habit, this year, when every month seemed to bring bad news, and I held my breath, waiting for results of one kind or another. You see, my dad taught me years ago, even when there's no cure in sight, when the pain has invaded your bones and your leg can't press the clutch, you don't give up. You swap your manual gears for automatic and keep on driving. I'm going to read one of the elegies from my last book. It was written for my uncle, and it's called 100 Words for Love, in memory of Seni Seneviratne, 1928-2023. Because you were my favourite uncle who helped me hold on to my mother at my father's funeral to stop her falling into his grave during the incessant prayers of the presiding priest. Because you wrote my name in Sinhala script after a man in Avizuela who looked like family sent us to Rakwana, where a priest named Charles de Gaulle promised to search the baptism records for our ancestors. Because of the stories over sundowners, watching the swallows skim the surface of your pool in Akiaka. Because you always said, why use one word when you can use 100? I was very proud that that poem was exactly 100 words after much tinkering. Okay. What it is. It's the light. It's a woman hanging clothes to dry on the rooftop of a half-finished building beyond my roof terrace wall, like things planned, like beginnings and patience enough to wait until there's time and money for endings. It's the call to prayer, then another call from another mosque in the music of a language unknown yet familiar. It's the repetition, like intercessions, like calling to a God, like calling to belief, and the whole valley echoing with something more than the material fact of my body sipping lemon tea in the shade with the sun throwing its light back at me. And finally, I'm going to read something from that's also in that book that was mentioned earlier, the Colonial Countryside book, which came out last year. I wrote a series of poems that were in the voices of children, Black children who were in portraits that were done in the 17th and 18th century. Mostly they were nameless children, in which the captive children begin to speak. Painting of Anne Howard, Lady Young, in Sudbury Hall. When they brought me here, the strange noises that passed between them were like stones falling on my head until I learned to look for meanings. My name is the one they use for the flimsy things inside a binding they call leather. They say book, and their eyes look down on marks called words. I match the sounds they make to things I see and read their moods in the foreign language of their faces, but I won't let my tongue curl and speak them out. Silence is my hiding place. I have the lock and key. I'll not open the door. Some pages may offer words. This one is silent. Thank you.
Thank you, Seni. That was a wonderfully rich reading. Thank you. And next we move on to Naomi's set of personal elegies. She'll be reading, obviously, from Salt and Snow, which I have to say is a marvelous, soul-stirring collection. It's life-affirming, it's complex, it's lyrical and passionate, and I know you're in for a treat tonight. Just to give people a brief biog of Naomi, I know we all know and love her, but Naomi Foyle is a British-Canadian poet, science fiction novelist, dramatist, and essayist based in Brighton in the UK. Her many poetry publications include The Night Pavilion, an autumn 2008 PBS recommendation, The World Cup, published in 2010, Adamantine, published in 2019, and also 10 pamphlets. Naomi is currently collaborating with artists Wendy Pye and Razia Aziz on 2 film poems from Salt and Snow, and with the Brighton arts organisation Lunar Arts on their ACE-funded project using creativity to open up healthy conversations about death and dying. Naomi Foyle is reader in critical imaginative writing at the University of Chichester and poetry and fiction editor of Critical Muslim. Astra, her multimedia theatre adaptation of her eco-science fiction quartet, The Gaia Chronicles, won the 2022 Brighton Fringe Onker Green Curtain Award. For her poetry and essays about Ukraine, she won the 2014 Grigory Skovoroda Prize. And here we have Naomi with a marvelous reading of personal elegies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for that very fulsome introduction. And thank you to Rob and Seni and Catherine for your beautifully encouraging, warm commendations for Salt and Snow, which I'm so proud to have on the back cover of the book. It's wonderful to celebrate it with you all here. And I've read with Rob before in Brighton and London, so it's wonderful now to read with Seni and Catherine. I'd also like to thank John Luke Chapman for the stunning cover image of the book, which for me represents the miraculous regeneration that our world so desperately needs right now. This collection sprang for me out of a long period of grief over personal losses, war crimes, invasions, the genocide in Gaza, climate crisis. And these early responses from my fellow creatives and Lunar Arts as well has helped me feel that other people might take comfort or strength from my expressions of grief. The line between the personal and the collective grief isn't always hard and fast. But in this set, I'll be reading some of the elegies for friends and writers. The book is dedicated to one other person I need to thank, which is my friend and mentor, Carol Rumens, who I'm happy to say is still very much with us, writing her insightful poem of the week column for The Guardian and her own exquisite work. And I highly recommend her new pamphlet, Mind's Eye, from Broken Sleep Books, which is a tribute to Paul Celan. This poem, Winter Hay, is an elegy for Carol's late partner, Yuri Drobyshev, whom I was fortunate to meet. It starts with an epigraph from Emily Dickinson. Winter Hay, in memory Yuri Drobyshev. Winter under cultivation is arable as spring. Autumn had reaped a rare harvest, 3 wise men scythed by that dark star which disappears when looked straight at, but burns the edge of sight. A poet, friends, gathered in, a trail of orchid pollen, Solomonic gold dust, an elephant's last trumpet, their gifts to a cold new year. Surely sufficient grief to see me through till spring. But my homemade Christmas card, received in late reply, an unseasonable image. Mown hay from a sad carol, her Russian sailor gone across the night's black sea. My memory of his voice, an empty jar of caviar. The next reading is an extract from a long poem, my tribute to the poet and psychogeographer Niall McDevitt, who died of skin cancer in 2022. Niall and I were time twins. We were born on the same day of the same year, and we met on our 39th birthday. Niall was an extraordinary writer and literary tour guide, and he leaves a phenomenal legacy of books and films of his London walks. There's so much to grieve over his loss, but one thing that particularly upset me was the thought that he believed that one particular day of sunbathing had caused his melanoma. An asymmetric 55. Your death snapped the spine of twinship, singed the days, blanched the nights, drained my mirror, cold-shouldered my vision of the universe into reverse. You, shocked silver hair, blackened grin, bleached soot-striped suit, receding, as I, white-lipped, grey-skinned, flow on. The reason you have breast cancer, my oncologist told me, is because you have breasts. Oh, Niall, We've all fallen asleep in the sun. Please let us let that one hot day float free, blithe as a larkling, and believe the reason you had skin cancer is because you had skin. White lambskin of your northern kin, thin parchment skin of a poet in the Anthropocene, thrumming skin of a baron. And though what you called that black sun on your belly proved a terrible beauty spot, a ravaging angel, it kills us to know. In poem after poem, in illness and humor, in London's charms and Julie's arms, love swept, time tapped, struck by the moment, you became one with the drum of the world. Elegies are laments for the dead, not always eulogies that praise the dead, and sometimes they can be both. Other times, elegists are criticized for being self-centered, and for that reason, I included many notes at the end of the book, paying extensive notes on my subjects. For me, though, poetry is a safety valve for difficult emotions, and perhaps grief is perhaps the most difficult of all, in the way that it combines so many hard emotions. This poem, Bomb, is an elegy for the poet, novelist, and activist Judith Kazantsis, who died in part of climate crisis, having been dehydrated several times in her last summer. I wrote it after reading another poem shaped like a bomb by the beat writer Gregory Corso. Did you weep? Ahmed asked. Yes. Yes, I did, I said. And if I hesitated, it was because the tears came late and in the dark, a furtive ancient grief, a stealth bomb of despair I thought surviving cancer had diffused. But no, I wept all night for her, her pearl pink smile, confusion, tart commands and chronic pain, all the medical missteps that led her far away from us, into bright phantasmal rooms that float about my head like lanterns. The years will shrink to distant sparks until I too am dead. Yes, I cried hard for her, and not just for her, for me, for my miscalculations, postponed visits, that neglected book review, the priorities of recovery that put Babylon and Jerusalem, endless emails, and the East End before her in my diary this year. You did see her again, held her hand before she died. Be kind, be kind. Be kind to your human grieving self. But even if I am, is it possible, I demand to know, my fist inside my mouth, to weep for just one loss? Judith gone, 6 weeks after the summer heatwave that depleted her electrolytes and ruined crops all over Europe. 2 years after losing Irving, dear, devoted Irving, gone too. My Solomon and Sheba both passed into legend, never again to pour golden tea, regale me with tales of Libya and Florida, arrive at the clock tower with folding chairs and Guatemalan cushions to protest genocide in Palestine. And still the Arctic calves, storms seethe, the last male white northern rhinoceros now dead, 3 more children shot and killed in Gaza this week. Oh, if you ever hear me laugh, please know that when I cried for Judith, I cried until my eyes were molten pools of lead. Grief feels like a different process every time, and although rivers flow into the same ocean. Grieving my friend, the memoirist, Assyriologist, and champion weightlifter, Gwendolyn Like, was made less painful for me by the way that she accepted her death and involved her loved ones in the process. So I wrote a sonnet crown for Gwendy that I was able to deliver like batches of muffins in the 6 months prior to her death. So she was able to read and approve it. It's 15 interlocking sonnets, and I'm going to read 2. From On Telling Gwendy I'm Autistic, in memory Gwendolen-like. My bones say death is neither here nor there. Now the size of a bandaged rat hidden in a ninja headscarf, Gwendolen's tumor begs to differ. Death is squatting on her neck, slowly rifling her mouth, weeping blood and pus into her soup. To eat, talk, soon pleasures past. Yet Gwendy laughs at Dignitas. The hotel's a rip-off, she advises. 2 rooms for 50,000 euros. Though there's no charge for the pill. Eternity, she notes, is free. So she lives, lets death consume her, curious to join all those who went before and ever will. Who went before and ever will remain there, having had their fill of time, its tests and gifts, the ruthless way the wheel uplifts, just to dump, drag, crush us in a stony rut, again, again, until we kiss the earth, raw eyes shut, seek the stillness of an access, observe, exist. They, like pebbles flung into the sky, have flown the span of please and why. Leave us more than watches, books, rings, front doors, more than memories, stirring words. In the wars we daily wage, the dead are a magnetic force. Draw our needles inward, adjust our churning course. Death, of course, is a natural part of life, and in a just world, we wouldn't live forever, but we would live our full span and then journey on to whatever awaits us next, or whatever we believe awaits us next. To end this set, I'd like to read a poem about the most beautiful funeral I've ever attended, a Quaker service in honor of the painter and psychotherapist and Quaker elder Susanna Lobb. Pomegranate, saffron, forsythia, seagrass, periwinkle, mulberry, lilac, sown in the circle of green stones at Helen's neck, whisper in the pale shells adorning Tim's collar, shine from the string of orange kernels slung over Joe's shoulder, waltz in glossy lozenges across Indy's purple sweater, glisten in the scarlet beads looped around my throat, glow beneath Ben's button-down blue shirt, miraculously match Phil's patterned top. On the day her children call for color, Susie's decades of necklaces garland her mourners, make a garden of our grief. As if absence is a prism, slipped rainbows clasp us to each other, soil and sky, her and here.
Thank you, Naomi. That was wonderful. It's beautiful to end the first half of the evening on rainbows and colours. It's lovely. So we're just going to have just a couple of minutes break, and we're going to put in the link in the chat, links to buy the books this evening, including, of course, the wonderful Salt and Snow. The other thing we are going to do, there are going to be links to 2 donations if anyone is interested. One is a donation to help Mohammed and his family of 7 in Gaza. And we can assure you that the money does go directly to Mohammed on his phone. So there will be a link there. There's also a link to donations to the IEL Foundation for Education, an Oxford-based charity with a special focus on Gaza that is recommended by people in Gaza. So we're just going to have a couple of minutes break, but obviously do think about those donations and think about clicking on the links to the wonderful books you're hearing tonight. And we'll be back in just two 2 minutes' time. I think we'll perhaps start our second half of the evening. We're going to start with a reading by Catherine Okoronkwo. Catherine is of Nigerian heritage, grew up in the Middle East and studied in the West. She holds an MA and a PhD in creative writing from Manchester Metropolitan University. Her writings have been anthologized in Elevator Fiction in 2016, Crossings Over in 2017, Black Lives Matter, Poems for a New World in 2020, Where We Find Ourselves from Arachne Press in 2021, and Poetry in Settled Status for All, Civic Leicester 2022. Catherine's debut collection of poetry, Blood and Water, was published by Waterloo Press in 2020 and was featured at the Swindon Festival of Literature in 2021 and in Gladfest in 2023, having been shortlisted for the Gladstone Library Writer in Residence programme. Catherine's second collection, Rise from the Ashes, is forthcoming from Broken Sleep Books later this year. Catherine serves as a Church of England priest in London. So let's hear Catherine's lovely poems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. It really is a privilege to listen to Seni and Naomi's poetry. Such a gift and such a blessing, really. Particularly as we wrestle with real life gritty issues. So I just feel so blessed at the moment. I'm going to start with a poem titled Papuku, and Papuku in Igbo means grandfather. Having lived in the Middle East, in Jerusalem, in Gaza particularly, there's a sense of trying to locate oneself throughout my upbringing. And one of the anchoring people was my grandfather, who I used to see every couple of years in Nigeria. So this is titled Papuku. On a carved stool, he gulps Ovaltine, fans fire, wood in the yard. In a cast iron pot, plucked chicken, feathers on the ground. He rises in sandaled feet, mutters incantations to a host of silent gods. From our box, scoops tobacco in nostrils, chews cola nut. Eyes closed, hand raised, begs with a guttural voice, may Abara accept our gift. This second poem is titled Identity, and the backstory of this poem is actually thinking about my upbringing in Beit Hanina, in Jerusalem, and often feeling quite displaced in Jerusalem as a child and longing for the things that would connect me. And one of those things often is food, particularly my grandmother's food and my mother's food. And there's something about food that gathers us together, and food or eaten together that heals those wounds of dislocation, and wounds particularly when it comes about because we do not see the gift of the other. Identity. Memories from my birthland, a place of soot and grime, the Umwaba yard where Mamuku's kitchen funneled tales among wafts of goat pepper soup, plantain and yam, oxtail and tripe stew, prepared in mother's kitchen for special occasions, On other days, plain pancakes sweetened with lemon and sugar, peanut butter on thick cut bread from the local village store, a bowl of porridge with carnation milk swirled in. Mamuku talked and talked, dropped off, head bopping, pulled down lips dribbling, snores deepened, lengthened, till her morning Milo. I am all these things, plantains, pancakes, and pulled down lips. The feast. Tongue lolls, blood gushes, rushes unto baked umwaba soil. My witch doctor grandfather carves up the carcass, spends hours cleaning, praying and splaying. The stink tickles the air. 7-year-old eyes transfixed by the smirk on the dead creature's jowls. The goat with a slit throat, has it breathed its last bleat, or more Miri thrown him a lifeline? And my final poem, Dead and Dying. A charred fetus abandoned on Aba Owerri Road. A youth under a torn umbrella mends shoes. Ashes and sparks scatter in the Hamatan wind. A woman balances a basket of coconuts to sell. Sweat blisters on bleached skin. A wild silhouette falls, hand flails through a tire in orangey red flame. Stomachs of young and old gather round a wide-eyed cow. The air, dry and clogged, with burning rubber, masks the stench of gutters, rotten waste, the dead and dying. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. That was such a powerful reading. Thank you. And now we're going to hear a second set of poems from Naomi, where she's reading collective elegies from her new collection. And then we hope to have time for a brief Q&A. So if you can begin to think of any questions, please jot them into the chat, and I'll try and include as many as possible. And then the evening does end with a poem each from each of our poets. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you, Rob and Catherine, for these profound poems about finding that home in poetry, which has been so scattered for you. And I reflect actually on my very different childhood, but similar in the sense that my family moved between continents, and the sense that that's given me, which I know that you share, of being part of the human family. In the second part of the book, I try to explore my grief over the deaths of people who've been killed by structural and geopolitical violence, and that's obviously that's quite a very different kind of elegy. I'm going to start with one of the title poems, Salt, Snow, Earth, and this is one of the poems which is going to be made into a film poem by Wendy Pye and Razia Aziz. Salt, snow, earth. Salt bites snow. Snow slaps earth. Earth pounds salt. And so it goes on and on and on, round and round in every shade of hand, claw teeth, hard palm, fist, salt, snow, earth, salt, bite, slap, pound, bite, a game to get the blood up, heart pumping, skin singing, no breath or time to ask, whose bodies are blanketed, whose bodies blanked out, what are the odds, white wins. I have to thank Kathy also for your very encouraging response to this next poem, Lockdown Week 10, which is a response to the murder of George Floyd. In the first section of the poem, I quote from his dying words, and although I think it's important to have them on record in the book, I don't actually feel comfortable saying them. I feel like they are so his words. So I'm going to read the second part of the poem, which comes from my reading of an article in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune and quotes from George Floyd's former partner, Christina Dawson. That king should not have died before his time, says Big Floyd's ex-girlfriend, who now will never give him that bottle of tahine she was keeping for their first post-lockdown meetup, a shakeable mix of chili, salt, and lime. Perfect on mango popsicles, margarita rims, corn on the cob, steak, fajitas, omelets, popcorn, hot chocolate, you name it. A Mexican life hack I only know about, thanks to a life hacked by America's axe. A gentle giant, complex king, who had done his time, learned his lessons, found a precarious place, work in security at the Conga Latin Bistro, but who will never again hug his regulars, his children, felled across the path we all walk together until we don't anymore. I also want to thank Simon Madrell, marvelous poet, IT whiz, and really great help to me, Simon, on editing the book, as was Rob and others. And in particular, Simon helped me with this poem, The Dark Earth, which is in memory of all those cut down due to their nature. Raspberries, blueberries, strawberries, oranges, clementines, ackee, coconut, plantain, peaches, grapes, bananas, durian, jackfruit, dragon fruit, kola nut, rose hips, mulberries, sloes, lychees, langsat, rambutan, apricot, lemon, crab apples, star apples, gooseberries, guava, cranberries, pomegranates, plums, figs, rowan, hawthorn, water elder, sapodilla, pomelo, black, red, and white currants, globe, beefsteak, heirloom, and cherry tomatoes, peppers, olives, dates. Plant in narrow furrows, cane, train, net, and cage. Discard the shriveled and bruised, hand-pick the finest in coral punnets, sapphire baskets. Ripen at home, break your fast with their flesh, slice into salads, cherish their sweetness, don opulent robes, praise their self-seeding in hymns, sacred texts. Spindle, pink currants, rebellion tomatoes, passion fruit, ladyfingers, hazelnuts, thimbleberries, rose apple, kepel, wild mango, musk melon, fairy bell. Water with weed killer, nip in the bud. Should they persist, hack with knives and machetes, chop down and string up, beat with bats, iron bars, hurl from tall towers, crush, burn, behead. Ditch their remains in the earth you call dirt. When I'm writing collective elegies, I try not to center myself. Sometimes they can take that tone that is sarcastic. That's one way of kind of distancing oneself. to express anger. But when you're writing from a place of empathy, though, I find myself it's hard to avoid the lyric I. So in that case, when I'm doing that, I try to indicate my positionality to express somehow the gulf between my grief and the experience of the people I am writing about. Or in this case of this next poem, writing for, one of whom is Dmytro Drozdovsky, who's here with us tonight. Also, my other friends in Ukraine, Ihor Pavliuk and Luda Pavliuk. And this is after the earthquake in Turkey and before the anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. For split seconds, now and then, I imagine it, being buried alive, the weight of a hospital, a shopping mall, my home on my chest. How the panic attacks I've fought off over the years, a glazed green face mask, that tall hostile man on the tube, the crowd at Glastonbury, might seem mild reminders I was alive and able to be somewhere else. Does the body know what to do? Dial down, hibernate, dream the dreams of bombed buildings, ruined gardens, collapsed agreements. Dmytro, I want to email. Promise me you have water in every room of your flat. But when the ceiling is a coffin lid, the room a casket of plaster dust, a gas pipe crooking your throat, not even a hip flask would save you from thirst. Dmytro, I don't email. One day we will drink wine by candlelight with Ihor and Luda in the Buena Vista music bar. I will read you this, and perhaps you will forgive me for not knowing what is normal for war. And I think I'm going to read not this one, but the next one. Thank you, just for time. So of course that poem just takes on, far more, horrifying resonance now. I mean, words really do just completely fail me at the depravity of what's occurring now in Gaza. There are 3 poems about the genocide in Gaza and the war crimes of October 7th in the book. And they're not by any means the first poems I've written about Palestine, Israel, and I know very well that what's happening now did not start on October 7th. This poem, which I wrote in early 2024, it still expresses for me what I still believe is true and has to be fought for, which is the fact that there is no military solution to the occupation of Palestine, to the apartheid regime in Israel, that we need a political process, and that must be founded on truth and on principles of justice and on dialogue. And this poem is dedicated in the memory of Rifat Al-Aria, who was a Gazan poet and educator who did a lot to teach his students about anti-Semitism in the way that he taught them Shakespeare and The Merchant of Venice. And it's also after 2 peace activists, the Palestinian peace activist Ali Abu Awad and the Israeli peace activist Amidar, and you can hear them in conversation if you search for them on YouTube. Nowhere is it written, love must fail. A nation's morgues tortured with corpses, its army sets out to annihilate darkness by the light of white fire, the lamp of bombs signed by children with hearts and stars. A boy tugs on his brother as witness. I'm dying of hunger. Help me, world. Then stops, turns away, his drained face saying he knows there's no world anymore. Cats eat sniped bodies. Bombed sewers breed disease. Teens in costume hijabs and eyeshadow bruises cackle into cameras, raid fridges, blast showers, gleefully flick electricity switches. Captives shiver. Stripped flesh is currency. lingerie loot. A soldier grins, tugs on a bra strap twisted into barbed wire. Black lace ghosts, silk soles, expose his pose. Here, a university, silent all autumn, at last allows a silent vigil, because silence is all we now have in common. Elsewhere, people march, cry justice, peace, freedom, lie on the road wrapped in shrouds and kaffirs, light Hanukkah candles in ceasefire menorahs, write on white kites the death of a poet, a tale to be told in every tongue. Here and there, more and more, brave people build bridges from the wreckage of fences, meet above the abyss, look not down, but at each other. Were we going to have some Q&A now and then finish with the poems? Should we do that?
Yes, I haven't seen any questions yet in the chat. If anyone perhaps wants to put their hand up and ask a question, we can unmute you and go from there.
There's Uzma. Can Uzma be unmuted?
Hello.
Hello.
Great to hear from you, Naomi. It's so lovely to hear your voice and listen to some of your really moving poetry. I'm wondering whether or not you find the composition of these poems emotionally draining and or cathartic. And I imagine it's a mixture of both, but I'd be really interested in your thoughts on that.
Yes, I think that initially I do feel the need to do it for some kind of emotional release. And then there is a kind of a question of whether in some ways you keep the emotion alive in a way by doing it as well and returning to it. And maybe, but I think that it's part of expressing it, even if, for example, I would like to forgive myself, over, not seeing Judith as much as, looking back, I wish that I had. Perhaps just by me saying that might help someone else kind of just feel that they could accept that in their own life as well, So, so I think there is something that still touches a nerve. And also I am concerned about how other people's grief might be triggered by my grief when people are at a different, very different position to me, so that concerns me as well. So there are anxieties around it, but I think the only way for me to be able to work through that is by sharing and hearing from people. So it does take I think it does take a bit of courage, and that's why perhaps very much in England grief is a taboo subject, because it's such a concatenation of emotions and so unique to each person, that it can be very volatile, obviously, to talk about. So I'm hoping that by putting them in poems, there's a way of talking about the poem, different ways into the poem, and there's some kind of it's a sort of a halfway house in a way for me to meet people from their experiences. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. That was a very powerful reflection. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Usma. We've perhaps got time for one other question. Does anyone else want to ask anything? Patricia, is that you put your hand up? Yes. Can we unmute Patricia, Simon? Hold on, can we unmute Patricia?
I've asked her to unmute. She needs to tick yes.
Right. Yeah. Nearly there. It's gone back, Patricia. Can you unmute again?
Yeah, Patricia, you need to tick the box yes to unmute.
Mute, yes.
Got it. Right.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. No, Naomi, I'm interested that you say you're worried about people's anxieties in hearing your elegies, but might trigger something in them. But I think that's the wonder of elegies, that your own any elegy written deeply and profoundly sparks off that same emotion in another person reading it or hearing it who has experienced a grief and a bereavement. And in that way, I think elegies are so profound and universal, really, no matter, what. So I don't see why that gives you anxiety.
Well, for example, I think this is probably more around the collective elegies, but it could also be around if I'm writing a poem about someone else's mother, for example, just hoping that they. Yes, I don't know. It seems a bit of, there's also a thing about being a poet, and then it becomes, in a way, kind of part of your professional life, and you're taking that person out, and your memory of that person is kind of becoming part of, in a way, of your career and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I don't believe that I have upset people who I know. I don't believe that that's the case. But if for example, there are the three poems I've written about what's been the violence in Gaza, and I do make a point of saying the mass war crimes because I believe there were war crimes. And one of the poems is also an elegy to one of the Israeli young women who was killed. And it has felt to me sometimes as though it's been hard for some people to have empathy for people on the other side, and that is a kind of bit two-way. And it's a kind of a question of the balance of it as well. And I just wanted my heart to hold everyone. That's what I just tried to do. I've had a very long political engagement with Israel-Palestine. But I just don't think we're going to get this to the end of this. We're not going to find justice and peace unless people can kind of recognize the grief of the on the other side, and all sorts of other things have to happen too. It's not as simple as just doing that, by no means. I think there has to be boycott, there has to be marches, there has to be political pressure. But I just think on a one-to-one basis, that's just where I am. If I see those images of October 7th, I weep as well. And then but obviously that it should have ended there. Netanyahu should have resigned. That was a complete failure on the part of the state of Israel. And in terms of security, this should never be happening, what's happening in Gaza. So there's so much analysis of that situation in the poems. I just wanted to get to, for me, just a human truth of it. And yeah, so I tend to kind of maybe overthink things and sort of anticipate how people might react to that. But I think people can tell that I'm coming from just a place of caring. Really, I just care, and and just desperately want to see a change. And I do take hope where people talk to each other and not necessarily from the same position. Not necessarily being an anti-Zionist Jew. A Zionist talking to an anti-Zionist, to me, like that seems like that has to happen. And that only by persuasion, only by that conversation happening, can there be a hope of that person perhaps shifting in their view. So that's maybe a far bigger question than elegy, but to bring it down to the elegy, I just offer these from where I am, and people can leave them if they doesn't resonate with them. It's not intended to ask anyone to feel what I feel. It's just showing what I feel.
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you, Patricia, for that debate really about compassion and elegy and empathy really. And I'd like to end the evening with 3 readings from our marvelous trio of poets. So Seni, Catherine and Naomi, if you could each read a poem before we finish. Thank you. Seni, do you okay to start?
Mute myself.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a poem that I wrote in a book that it was about my dad largely, but it's one of the poems that's about my mother. The Weight of the World. Oh, how they blew like vast sails in the breeze, my mother's wet sheets, pegged hard to the rope of her washing line. There was always hope of dry weather and no need for a please or thanks between us as we hauled them down. Whether to make the fold from right to left or left to right, to tame the restless heft, my job to know. I won't call it a dance, but there were steps to learn and cues to read. The give and take of fabric passed like batons in a relay race. She was my due north, her right hand set west, mine tracing the east. We closed the distance, calmed the wayward weight, bringing order to the billowing world.
Lovely.
This is a poem that's coming up in my autumn collection, my second collection, and it was a response to George Floyd. Say my name. Chinyere is my middle name. God's gift, God's gift, God's gift. From my mother's womb, my father prophesied over my life to remind me of who I am, whose I am, and why I am. Imagine a society where my lips are no longer silent with the pain of subjection and rejection. No longer silent, speaking my truth. Imagine a community where my feet no longer shuffle with shame, shackled by a hierarchy of color, but I stride confident to that high table. Imagine a world where my black body is no longer contorted to fit white expressions, white conceptions, but I can just be agile, expansive, and free. The paradigm of grace doesn't begin with privilege. It's found in the depths, in the other, on the edges. Grace is found in people that look like me. Do you see me? The whiteness of my eyes, the contours of my face, the brown of my skin. Imagine a new dawn where I am no longer treated as guest, not a square peg being hammered into a round hole, but accepted as a full flourishing member of the human family. My name is Chinyere. My name is God's gift. My name is daughter. My name is beloved. My name is child of God. Say my name. Thank you.
This is a poem in memory of my mother, Brenda MacDonald Riches, who died in 1994. And, you know, so the grief is always with me. And this poem is called On Turning 53, because that was when, you know, I was now older than her. So I had outlived her in that sense. She died of cancer and I had had cancer just kind of previously in years coming before that. So so obviously you know, when I got the cancer, I thought I could have died of it. So this is Yeah, this is on turning 53. In memory, Brenda MacDonald Riches. Oh, and I should just say she died when the comet was hitting Jupiter, if you remember, back in 1994. All those years since her death, spent sunburned, moon-spun, getting high on Venetian perfumes, digging into Mercury with a silver grapefruit spoon, singing of that distant time when Mars was blue. Years as far away as marbles in someone else's childhood. For I have now lived long enough to learn that those alluring orbits were simply flybys, gravity assists, to catapult me through my own cellular debris and sling me out, a battered probe, past the ghost of that disintegrating comet, captured by Jupiter the month my mother breathed her last, now lost in verdigris vapors, antiquarian cloud. Yes, out past all that, past Saturn's frozen halo, the shattered glitter of a sacrificial moon, raked by diligent sisters into rings for lonely fingers, a silent ice LP, slowly vanishing Zen garden, I blink at and sail by. Out, 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 to Uranus and its eerie stillness, Neptune's diamond rain, the ecstatic calm I never thought I'd find. Out past Pluto's heart, that double-lobed grey crater, beyond which I am no more than a glinting hint of the sun I can never leave behind. For though my mind drifts ever on into a starlit sea of dust, my feet, older now than hers, still tread, look down, the burning earth.
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you to Seni and to Catherine, and thanks for a wonderful evening. There have been some great comments in the chat. I want to just quote from Kay Sairad, who said, a marvelous, profound set of poems. And I think that's what we've had this evening. So if we can unmute, we can hopefully share the applause with Seni, with Catherine, and with Naomi. Thank you. Do unmute, we can hear it then.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
It's
so
been
much.
Thank
That was
you.
great.
an evening.
you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, wonderful.
Thanks to everyone for
Well
coming.
done.
And we welcome Salt and Snow into the world.
Mm.
Thank you, Rob, for being there and holding us all tonight, along with Simon. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Seni. Thank you, Kathy. Please buy their books. I know you will want to, if you haven't already.